Well, that's a tough way to end the season if you're the Indiana Pacers. Their season ended in a 4-game sweep to the Miami Heat. A lot of people, including myself, believe that this would be a pretty decent series. It wasn't at all. A lot of people predicted that it could go maybe like 6 games. Even with the loss of Domantas Sabonis, like a lot of people believe these teams could be somewhat evenly matched, depending on how Victor Oladipo looked. And yeah, it wasn't. The Indiana Pacers, they were really never competitive in this series at all, unfortunately. And as a result, they did fire their coach Nate McMillan today, which came as a bit of a surprise considering they just gave him a contract extension recently. So, but yeah, you get swept 3 out of 4 years in the playoffs. Like, that's bound to happen. I believe it was the Cavs who swept them Paul George's last year in Indiana. Then they were swept last year to Boston. Now they were swept this year against the Miami Heat. So, obvious frustration for the Indiana Pacers, but it doesn't always mean that's the end. Like, who knows what this team could do in the offseason. And yeah, let's just go over what maybe they could do. And one of the biggest question marks with the Indiana Pacers is obviously Victor Oladipo. He's coming off a torn ACL. He came back this season. He shot under 40% from the field. He wasn't very good, but that's expected. Guy coming off an ACL injury. Usually it takes them, that first year to kind of get themselves back, and then the second year they come back, they're kind of their old selves again. But Victor Oladipo has suffered serious injuries in the past, as well as this one, so the Indiana Pacers may be a little bit weary about, giving him a contract extension, since he is going to the final year of his deal. Next year he's going to be making $21 million, and after that he's an unrestricted free agent. And more than likely he's going to be asking for a max deal from the Indiana Pacers, and I'm not quite sure if they're going to want to do that or not. There has been some rumors from Bleacher Report. They were just saying that a lot of them don't expect Victor Oladipo to be back with the Indiana Pacers. There was a little bit of some confusion at the start of the NBA bubble. It was Victor Oladipo. He was kind of iffy about playing. Like, he originally said he wasn't going to play at all, right? And a lot of people, were accepting of that, but then he said he was still going to travel to the bubble with the team. So people were just wondering, like, if you're not going to play, why even go to the bubble at all? So that led people to believe, like, he was healthy enough to play. So, long story short, he ends up playing, and he doesn't play very well, but they were already in the playoffs, and we already know the result of what happened when they got to the playoffs. But Vic did show some visible frustration when asked by the media about it. It kind of had some Kawhi Leonard Spurs vibes, just a bunch of people questioning, how injured he actually was. And for a guy like him, that's got to be frustrating, like, whenever a guy says he's injured, the way I look at it is like, who are you to tell him how injured he is? Only he knows his body. So yeah, that was a little bit of a weird situation, but yeah, he did come back, and Vic, he always tries his ass off, and it just wasn't good enough, and it's a big question mark as to whether he'll be back for them next season. There are a lot of talks about maybe the Miami Heat going after him, just to add another piece for them to, go for a championship in the final year of Vic's contract. Maybe the Miami Heat would be willing to accept that, because he isn't expiring, and then they would be able to go after Giannis Antetokounmpo just like everyone else will be in the 2021 offseason. So that's a big question mark for them going forward. And basically moving forward, we already know who the franchise player is of this team. It was their all-star this season, Domantas Sabonis. He averaged 18, 12, and 5. He's one of the most versatile bigs in the league. They signed him to a great contract. The most he's going to be making by the end of his contract is $21 million. So for a guy at his level, that's a big, big win for the Pacers. And, he's someone that they could definitely build around for the future. They signed Malcolm Brogdon to a big deal last year. Malcolm Brogdon's really, really good. he had a lot more on his plate this year, so his shooting percentages did go down. They weren't as high as they were in Milwaukee for obvious reasons, because he was strictly used as like an off-ball player there. But yeah, Malcolm Brogdon's always going to be one of the most efficient guards in the league. And another question mark with them is Miles Turner. A lot has been made about the fit between him and Domantas Sabonis, and we know they're not going to get rid of Domantas Sabonis, so where does that leave Miles Turner? Miles Turner is going to be making $18 million a year for the next 3 years. That is a great contract, in my opinion, for a guy who can shoot and block shots like he can. So I think there would be a lot of teams lining up for his services. I just don't really know what trade could be out there, though. Like, who knows? Maybe Boston explores something for Miles Turner. They could use an upgrade in their front court, obviously. But, I'm not really sure how that trade would work. It's pretty tough for the Indiana Pacers to be able to make that work, with getting something good enough back for Miles Turner, even though he kind of is like a backup center to them at this point. And they still, obviously, they have TJ Warren. They got him for the next two seasons at $11.75 million and $12.69 million. Very, very good deal for him. TJ Warren's a really good player, really good scorer. He obviously, in the playoffs, he didn't show off that bubble Warren level of play or anything like that, but he was solid. He's a good player, and yeah, he's definitely someone you'd want on your team. Ideally for the Pacers, I'd love to start him at the 4 and Sabonis at the 5, and then maybe find an upgrade at small forward. Who that is a big question mark, but it'll be up to them to find out who could maybe fill that spot. They are getting Jeremy Lamb back next year. He did suffer an injury which ended his season, but he's a really good shooter, pretty good defender as well, so they'll get him. They have Doug McDermott for $7 million next year. All he is really a shooter. He's bounced around the league a lot, so there isn't much to him, but he can knock some shots down off the bench. They do have Justin Holiday. Of course, they have the Holiday brothers, Aaron and Justin. I believe they'll probably bring back Justin just to keep him playing with his brother, just because whenever those two are in the game together, they really have great chemistry. Obviously, they're blood, so they should have good chemistry. But so they still got him. TJ McConnell. I believe TJ McConnell should have probably got some minutes in that last game. He was a DNP for them. The thing about TJ McConnell is that he's not a very skilled player at all, but he's just very crafty. He busts his ass on defense. Like, it seems like whenever he's on the floor, good things happen. So he's definitely a guy you'd love to have on your team, especially off the bench. Goga Bitadze was their first round draft selection last year. A lot of people were thinking after they selected Goga that this would be the end for either Turner or Sabonis. And that very well could have been their thought process, but Goga Bitadze pretty much gave them nothing this year. He's supposed to be a shooting big. That's pretty much his game, but he really didn't show any of that, and he couldn't defend at all. So he's a very raw player, but who knows, like, if he takes a big jump next year, that could force their hand into trading Miles Turner, just for them to save some money. They do have TJ Leaf. He hasn't worked out for them. He didn't play at all in the Miami series. There's not really a role for him on this team, I would say. It's a big question mark as to whether they'll bring him back or not, so we'll see what happens with that. And then pretty much what's left on their team, guys like Edmund Summer, Jakar Sampson, Alize Johnson, these guys are just depth players. Maybe they could upgrade a couple of those spots. And they should be picking somewhere in the mid-20s with their pick. So who could they add? Like, this draft is supposed to be kind of weak, but it's supposed to be a pretty strong draft in terms of rotation players. There aren't a lot of superstars in this draft, but there should be a bunch of quality, at least bench players or possible starters. So it's a big question mark. We'll see what happens with that. In my opinion, if I was the Indiana Pacers, I would call the Boston Celtics. I am a Celtics fan, so I wouldn't do this trade. But if I was them, I would call the Boston Celtics and see if I can get Gordon Hayward from them. I think Gordon Hayward would complete their lineup if they had Brogdon, Oladipo, Hayward, Warren, and Sabonis. It's a pretty lethal lineup. It's probably not winning you a championship, but Hayward is a really, really good player. He can handle the ball for you, and this all kind of depends on if he opts into his player option, which most people believe he will. With his injury history and everything like that, he's probably just going to take the guaranteed money. So, yeah, I believe that could raise the ceiling of this of that team most definitely. But it's tough for them. They, like I said, they did fire Nate McMillan, and there are rumors that they are going to be going after Mike D'Antoni, which is, I mean, if the Rockets do let him go, I think that would be a good option for them. They were one of the worst ranked offenses in the league, not only in terms of efficiency, but also in terms of pace. So they're very slow paced, but the thing about Mike D'Antoni that everyone knows is that he runs a 7 seconds or less offense and, bombs away from three. So if they added him, it would obviously make a big difference in their offense. It seems wherever D'Antoni goes, he makes a big difference offensively for the teams that he's coached. So, yeah, that's about it. Yeah, just my thoughts on the Indiana Pacers, what I think they could do this offseason, and their future, with Sabonis and Brogdon. So, yeah, thank you all for watching. Have a good day.